Dark Disciple a while ago. I think it was last year or so. I mean, it came out a really long time ago, but I hadn't really read it until recently, and I have quite a few thoughts on it. And I'm talking about Star Wars Dark Disciple, by the way, in case that wasn't clear. So yeah, basically, Quinlan Voss and Asajj Ventress team up to eliminate Count Dooku, and they end up getting becoming close friends. So at first glance, the idea of Quinlan Voss and Asajj Ventress becoming close friends like that, it just seems like bad fan fiction. But when you read Dark Disciple, you kind of change your perspective on that, and I think they told the story very well. Uh, Christy Golden, the author, did a good job with it. Now, a few thoughts on the content as well as some things within the plot. Um, First of all, I really wish that they hadn't killed off Asajj Ventress in the end. She's a really compelling character, and I think they did a wonderful job with her. And it was just very sad when she had to die, but I still think they managed to tell a great story, and her end was very fitting, and it really shows the evolution of her character. Now, as many of you may remember, back in Legends, in the Star Wars Obsession comics, I believe it was, Asajj Ventress is presumed dead because she's mortally wounded by Anakin. But later, it's revealed that she managed to heal herself to some extent, and she makes the pilots take the ship somewhere else, and her ending is left ambiguous. So I would have preferred something like that over her just explicitly meeting her end. And I think she could have been in Star. I think it would have been interesting to see her in Star Wars Rebels because after all, we saw Maul in Star Wars Rebels. So maybe they could have just let Ventress live and we could have seen her then, or maybe in the Mandalorian, or maybe somewhere down the line. And yeah, it's just really sad what happened. But moving on, some of my initial thoughts. So in the first chapter, there's a scene where a Jedi is on a ship full of civilians, and then Dooku shows up and he refuses to show any mercy and he wipes them all out. And so, what I really like about the Clone Wars and Dark Disciple and the way they tell the story, and they did a good job of this in Legends too, but what I really like about the non movie content is that they do a great job of showing how evil Count Dooku Darth Tyrannus really is. So, in this instance, we have him attacking a ship full of civilians. And it shows that he really is the cold blooded Sith Lord that he says he is. And there's no question about Dooku being an evil guy because there's really no room for ambiguity. And I think they did a great job of elaborating on that aspect of his character. Now, in the Jedi Council scene, I think it's very interesting how Mace Windu is the one who comes up with the idea of targeting Dooku. And so that reminds me of in Revenge of the Sith, where Mace Windu is going to strike down Darth Sidious. And so I don't really. Okay, I get the feeling that Mace Windu has some more forceful tendencies, but I don't really think he was close to the dark side. I'm not one of those people who buys into that idea, but I just think he acts a little differently, and he sort of is an example of a Jedi losing their way. But I don't really think that he was borderline dark side or anything of that nature. However, these specific occasions are important nonetheless. And of course, Anakin is the one who chimes in and agrees with Mace Windu that something has to be done about Dooku. And then when they get Quinlan Voss later, Anakin volunteers to go with Voss, and then Obi-Wan knows that's a bad idea, so they decide not to do that. But yeah, so those observations, and the other thing about Ventress is that when we see her in season 4, after the Night Sisters have been massacred, and she uh, goes on to become a bounty hunter, and she does do a good deed. She lets that woman go back to her brother, and also she rescues Obi-Wan from Maul and Oppress, and they fight them together, and she helps out, and she also helps out Ahsoka in season 5. So that might have led some people to believe that Ventress was going to be a permanently good character. Well, first of all, good is relative and it's very subjective, especially in Star Wars. And secondly, Ventress is really just trying to survive and do what she can to benefit herself in these cases, and that's a normal, rational thing to do. And obviously, deep down, she still has all that darkness from being a Night Sister and being Dooku's apprentice. And she also has the bottled up resentment and hate for all the people who have wronged her. So obviously, she feeds back into her feelings of revenge. She goes back to her resentful feelings because she's comfortable with that, and so she participates in the plot to take down Dooku. Now, obviously, that's what causes problems and things to go downhill, and Voss getting captured, and Ventress really struggling, and bounty hunters, and all that stuff, all the stuff in the story. Now, another thing that I liked about Dark Disciple is that they make many, many references to specific events from the Clone Wars. So Pong Krell and his betrayal, and Christopsis and everything. So it's very good at drawing parallels and making allusions. Now, obviously, Dark Disciple was supposed to be like 8 episodes of Star Wars The Clone Wars, so that makes sense why they would make those connections, but still impressive nonetheless. Additionally, something within the plot, the Jedi refer to Asajj Ventress as a quote unquote failed Sith. Now, obviously, it's clear, and it's especially made clear during the Clone Wars, that the Jedi don't really know what's going on. Actually, they're pretty clueless and out of touch. But when it comes to the Sith, the Jedi don't exactly know who's who. So they know that Darth Maul, the guy that Obi-Wan Kenobi cut in half, was one of the Sith Lords. And at the end of The Phantom Menace, Yoda's like, "Always children are a master and an apprentice." And then Mace Windu's like, "So which one was killed, the master or the apprentice?" And then the camera shot angle goes to Palpatine, obviously, Darth Sidious, but yeah. But the point is, they know that there's two, but they don't know who is who and which is which. And then when Dooku comes up later and he's a Sith Lord, they're like, okay, well, he's one. And then they're like, huh, and then what's going on? Like, what the heck? And then with Asajj Ventress, and she's Dooku's apprentice, they just call her a Sith, and I don't think the Jedi actually thought that Asajj Ventress was a full-fledged Sith Lord, but I'm sure some of them were confused at some point, but I think they're just referring to her as a failed Sith because they're just being lazy and just calling her that. It's like calling scrambled eggs an omelet. Like, that's not an omelet, but just going to be lazy because you don't know how to do it and what's going on, and you don't know how to cook, so you're just going to call it whatever you want. Basically, that's what it reminds me of. So there's that, and of course, there's also the aside where in Star Wars: The Clone Wars season 6, Kiadi like, we're in a group. I'm not sure this council is admitting how grave a situation we are in. And then Mace Windu was like, what is that? And then Kiadi like, that Dooku is not the Sith Lord, but merely an apprentice. And then Mace Windu's like, that, like many other things, has yet to be seen. And then, yeah. And then, of course, in The Son of Dathomir, Mace Windu makes an incorrect assumption that Dooku and Maul, Tyrannus and Maul, are together and that they're master and apprentice. Yeah, so the Jedi don't know what they're doing, basically. And I'm glad that that keeps getting explored, and that's great. Now, the stuff about the question that I have. So I think that Dooku intended to use Quinlan Voss as a tool, but I'm not entirely sure. So when it comes to Dooku, his ambitions, I will say, are slightly ambiguous. And the reason I say slightly is because he's definitely power hungry and he's a Sith Lord and all that, but like, does he actually want to overthrow Sidious? I think the answer is yes and no. So yes, he wants power, and yes, he wants to overthrow Sidious one day, but no, he actually knows that he can't do that, and he's smart enough to know that, unlike Maul and Vader, who were, I think, a little too overconfident, Dooku is smart enough to know that Sidious is a lot stronger than him. I mean, obviously they all know that, but Dooku is smart enough to know that it's probably impossible to destroy Sidious. And so Dooku sticks with Sidious because Sidious gives him power and Sidious makes him feel good, and under Sidious's wing, Dooku can flourish and have some of what he wants. And so basically, he clings to Sidious for protection and for benefits, but he knows that Sidious can turn around and slap him with lightning at any and slap him and just get rid of him at any point. So I think Dooku's fear of Sidious is really keeping Dooku in check. So I don't really think that Dooku was actually going to use Quinlan Voss to eventually become his apprentice and like work against Sidious or anything. I think that if Voss and Dooku had gone to Sidious, then Sidious would have probably killed Voss, and that would have been it, really. Yeah, and if you look at Dooku's character, when Sidious told him to kill Ventress, at first he was like, no, and then Sidious is like, well, I hope you're not using your own apprentice to try to overthrow me. And then Dooku's like, no. And then Sidious just yells at him, and Dooku's like, okay. And then he like orders Ventress to be killed. So I think that's also one of the reasons that Sidious was never going to keep Dooku, because Sidious wants someone who's ambitious and who's powerful but very ambitious and wants to get more and more. So that's where Maul and Vader come in. So Maul and Vader both have high ambitions, and they both try to overthrow Sidious, and they are both power hungry and thirsty, and they both want more and more. Whereas Dooku, although he does want more, he's sort of content with where he is, and he's scared of pissing off Sidious so much to the point that he'll never accomplish much on his own. He'll never try to achieve much on his own, and he'll always try to live under Sidious's wing, under his shadow. And I think Sidious views that as useful but pathetic in the long run, and it's just one of the reasons why Sidious is always annoyed with Dooku and just was very happy to get rid of him. As we know, Sidious does value Vader, and he did value Maul, even referring to him as a loss. So that's my short observation on Dooku, and I will say, Yeah, there's one final thing that I wanted to mention. Ventress clearly, and we knew this before, but it's made explicit here in this book that Ventress does not know who Sidious actually is. Like, obviously, she's seen him before in holograms, and she knows that he's the Sith Master, but she doesn't know his identity, and it does mention that she's only seen him in the darkness and she's never seen his face, never beheld his face, so she doesn't actually know who he is, and she just knows that he has a creepy voice and he's really evil and powerful and that. So Sidious's identity is not known to Ventress. And it's also pretty striking how hostile the Jedi are to Ventress. That was funny, but makes sense.